This is a moon rock. Considered priceless by collectors and governments around the world, moon rocks have only ever been collected by 3 space programs: NASA's Apollo missions from 1969 to 1972, the Soviet Union's Luna program from 1970 to 1976, and most recently, China's Chang'e mission collected lunar samples that touched down on Earth in June 2024. When the US gained possession of lunar samples from the Apollo 11 and 17 missions, President Richard Nixon, an awesome president who definitely didn't have one of the greatest political scandals in American history lying ahead of him, divvied the samples up. 270 of the so-called Goodwill moon rocks were given to each of the 50 US states, some overseas US territories, and nations around the world in 1970 and 1973. The Watergate scandal would hit the presses in 1974. Each sample was mounted to an engraved wooden plaque with a flag of the receiving nation or state. Bad actors are sure to be involved when something as rare and hard to get as moon rocks come into play. In fact, it's technically illegal for moon rocks to be held or owned by individuals. Unless a lunar meteorite falls into your lap, you can't personally own or possess a lunar sample. Now, more than 50 years later, at least 180 of the Goodwill moon rocks are unaccounted for. Some were stolen, some are missing, and some may never have been given in the first place. Who took them, where did they end up, and which are still missing today? Some Goodwill moon rocks were stolen and have yet to be found. Delaware's Apollo 11 sample was, quote, stolen right off the plaque. Malta's Apollo 17 moon rock similarly was torn from the plaque, and Sweden's entire Apollo 11 plaque was stolen in 2002. More of the Goodwill moon rocks are simply missing, perhaps stolen, or more likely lost in the shuffle of bureaucratic memorabilia management. From Apollo 11, Brazil, Canada, Cyprus, and Honduras are missing their plaques, and from Apollo 17, New Jersey and Nicaragua haven't reported locations of their moon rocks. Spain's Apollo 11 Goodwill moon rock might be with one of their most famous historical families. Given to dictator Francisco Franco and treated by the Franco family as a private possession, Franco's grandson maintains that his mother likely lost or misplaced it over the years within her household. Now, technically, we know exactly where Ireland's Apollo 11 Goodwill moon rock is. It's at the bottom of a landfill. The plaque was on display at the DUNSINK Observatory in Dublin. When the library the rock was in was burned, the sample was accidentally disposed of in a dump. The odds of this sample turning up are pretty slim. Romania's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock is believed to have been auctioned off with other belongings of Romanian communist leader NICOLAE Ceausescu after he was executed in the Romanian Revolution. Fortunately, many Goodwill moon rocks from both missions have been recovered thanks to the efforts of one NASA investigator turned professor. In the 1990s, scammers were placing false advertisements claiming to have moon rock samples for sale. They would offer fake moon rocks in exchange for the life savings of their victims, who were usually elderly. NASA brought in Special Agent Joseph Gutteins to stop this scam. In 1998, he headed up Operation Lunar Eclipse to find and stop these fake moon rock sellers. Gutteins took out an ad in USA Today saying moon rocks wanted, expecting to receive responses from forgers selling fake moon rocks. He was shocked when a man shared photos of one of the Goodwill moon rock plaques with him, offering to sell for $5 million. The seller blocked out the country's name and flag, but Gutteins had a feeling it was the real deal. Gutteins's mission had changed, and a new task lay ahead: scrounge up $5 million and recover this priceless sample. Of all people, it was billionaire politician Ross Perot who fronted the cash. One undercover sting later, Gutteins and NASA had recovered Honduras's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock, and a new page had turned for Gutteins. When he retired from NASA, he became a professor at the University of Phoenix. There, he challenged his students to find missing Goodwill moon rocks. This started a chain of moon rock discovery and recovery. Alaska's Apollo 11 sample is one of few that emerged without help from Gutteins's its team or students. In 1973, Alaska's Apollo 11 sample was on display at the Transportation Museum in Anchorage. The museum burned to the ground in what was believed to be arson. A 17-year-old boy named Coleman Anderson, who you might have seen on the television show Deadliest Catch, tagged along with his stepfather to help clean up the debris. He retrieved the plaque from the ashes and pocketed it. In 2012, Anderson emerged with a lawyer and sued the state of Alaska for the title. He testified under oath that the plaque had been damaged in the fire and he had restored it to near mint condition. But NASA saw no evidence of extensive damage or repair to the plaque. With his dubious deposition under oath weighing him down, Anderson soon returned the moon rocks to Alaska. No court case necessary. President Nixon wasn't the only scandal-embroiled president to be involved with the Goodwill moon rocks. Arkansas was missing its Apollo 17 moon rock sample and considered it lost. But in 2011, an archivist named Michael Hodge found the plaque among Bill Clinton's papers and memorabilia from his term as governor of Arkansas from 1979 to 1981. Generally, this mishap is believed to be an accident, and the Clintons readily agreed to return the moon rock to its rightful place. In 2010 in Colorado, a student of Joseph Gutierrez at the University of Phoenix traced the state's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock to former Governor John Vanderhoof, who received the plaque on behalf of Colorado from President Nixon in 1973. Vanderhoof agreed to return the moon rock. Both the Apollo 11 and the Apollo 17 samples were absent from the state of Hawaii's inventory in 2009. After an extensive search process that involved every museum and university in the state, both Goodwill moon rocks were found in a locked cabinet in the governor's office. They're now registered with the Foundation of Cultural Arts in Hawaii. In 2020, a man in Florida collected old plaques to turn into gun stocks from garage and estate sales. When he realized he possessed Louisiana's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock plaque, he anonymously hand-delivered it back to the state. While Gutierrez had nothing to do with the return of this particular moon rock, he commended the man for returning the sample and expecting nothing in return. In Gutierrez's 2010 search for Missouri's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock, the governor of the state in 1973, Kit Bond, didn't recall receiving the moon rock at all. When it was found in Bond's office in Washington, D.C., the governor turned senator joked that it may have been easier to find one's way to the moon than find the rock buried amongst the clutter of 40 years of public records. Needless to say, Bond returned the plaque to the state of Missouri. North Carolina's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock plaque rattled around in a Department of Commerce desk drawer for 30 years before Professor Christopher Brown at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill came into it in 2003. Brown returned it on 2010 when it entered an exhibit. Oregon's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock was tracked down by more of Gutierrez's students at the University of Phoenix. Tony Dowdle traced it to the Oregon governor's office in 2010. After one of Gutierrez's students hit the press in search of West Virginia's Apollo 17 Goodwill moon rock plaque, retired dentist Robert Connor presented it. He had inherited it from his brother, who was a business partner of former West Virginia Governor Arch A. Moore Jr. Moore Jr. was given the moon rock by the Nixon administration in 1973. While the whereabouts of the Apollo 11 Goodwill moon rock remain a mystery in Canada, the Apollo 17 plaque was tracked down by University of Phoenix students to the Canadian Museum of Nature. Before that, the moon rock was sent home to Canada in 1972 with Jamie Matthews after he won a student essay contest and witnessed the launch of Apollo 17. It was believed to be stolen in 1978 before it was located in 2003. From 1970 to 1974, Nicole Pastrana Borrero was the president of Colombia. Believing both the Apollo 11 and 17 plaques to be a personal gift, not a state one, he kept the plaques on display in his living room. A journalist reported this in 1985, which prompted Borrero's son, Juan Carlos, to return the displays. In Cyprus, their Apollo 17 plaque went missing during political unrest in 1974. It was found in 2002 when the son of a U.S. diplomat in Cyprus tried to sell it on the black market. The sample was returned to NASA, who only returned it to the government of Cyprus in 2023 after more than 20 years of negotiation and withholding. The diplomat and his son's name have never been revealed. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, unless what happens is the theft and sale of Nicaragua's Apollo 11 Goodwill moonrock plaque. The rocks were supposedly stolen from the Nicaraguan dictator Anastasio Somoza Garcia by a Costa Rican mercenary. Then they were traded by the mercenary to a Baptist missionary before being sold to Vegas mogul Bob Stupak in 2009. When Stupak died, his estate returned the sample to NASA, who returned it to Nicaragua in 2012. The Goodwill moonrock plaques from the Apollo 11 and 17 missions were gifted as symbols of the political neutrality of space. As space travel evolves and becomes increasingly privatized, I wonder if we will ever distribute moonrock samples like this again, or if moonrocks will become hallmarks of billionaires' private collections. In the meantime, enthusiasts continue to search for the missing and stolen Goodwill moonrocks, and we look to the stars.